It was my plan at the beginning of the year to preach sermons on Sundays that were connected to the Bible reading of that week. And most of the Sundays so far, that's what has happened, and I've enjoyed it. It is kind of like my version of preaching through the Bible. A lot of pastors who have been at a particular church for many years, at some time in that ministry, or even the whole time in some cases, they're preaching through a book of the Bible. They're trying to preach through the Bible over a period of years. I've always kind of wanted to do that, but 10 years is a long time to do that, and that's probably about what it would take to do it properly. So now I get a chance to do that here kind of in 1 year. If I kind of follow my plan, I'll end up preaching through the Bible and a sermon in most every book of the Bible. And when we get to the short prophet books, we may cover several of those in 1 week. So I'll have to make some decisions where to take the sermon from. The last several weeks, we've kind of gotten away from that, and I want to get back to it today. It fits in well with Mother's Day, because the last sermon that I preached in this approach was from the book of Joshua and then Judges. And since that time, we've gone through the book of Ruth, the book of 1 Samuel. Now we're in 2 Samuel and 1 Chronicles, and a whole bunch of Psalms. So one of these sermons in the next several weeks may be from one of the Psalms that we read, because there's been some really good ones. But especially from the book of Ruth in 1 Samuel, I'd like to speak about 3 remarkable women in those books. I've been blessed with quite a few remarkable women in my life. Women have a way of influencing we men in different ways than other men do. I was talking with a longtime friend recently, serving the Lord in another church, and he has a couple of grown boys that have dropped out of church. He and his wife are very burdened for them. He was calling me for some advice. His wife has been telling him, it is your responsibility 100% to get those boys back in church. And the dad says, I've tried everything I know how. They are grown men. They tell me basically to get lost. They know how I feel. They've heard it a bunch of times. I pray for them every day. There's only so much you can do once your child is an adult. And I told him, I said, in many cases, as grown men, it's still their mother that has more influence on them to do what is right than the father does. And I said, it might be good to put part of it back on your wife. Say, you're the one who gave them birth. Maybe you can reach them in a way I cannot. And I don't know if he's tried that yet. He may be calling for marriage counseling as a result of my advice, depending on how she reacts to that. But I've seen that to be true. There's something about a mother, no matter how tough and strong and experienced in life a man becomes, his mom holds a place in his heart that she can touch him in ways that the Father cannot. And these three remarkable women that I want to talk about today, Ruth, Hannah, and Abigail. Ruth is the best known, probably the most loved of the three. Hannah is less well known, but she's still fairly well known, and she gives a good example for us. Abigail is not nearly as well known, but there are some things about her from Gary's lessons that I really enjoy her story. I think she's a remarkable woman. I only want to read one verse as a text. This has really stood out to me through the years. It's one of the most, I call it maybe, or one of the greatest gospel verses in the whole Bible. It expresses an emotion, it expresses a reaction to God's grace and goodness in our life. It maybe captures more in one verse of what God is looking for from us and what our attitude should be toward God, especially toward Christ, what He did for us. Maybe more than any verse in the whole Bible, and that's what Ruth said to Boaz in Ruth chapter 2. Ruth chapter 2. And when, of course, we know the story, she came back with her mother-in-law, who was really no longer her mother-in-law because all the men in their life had died. And Naomi tried to get her to stay with her own people, but Ruth insisted on coming back with her. There's something about the spirit of Ruth that every one of us, male and female, should have. And she said to Boaz, when he extended favor to her in food and provisions for Ruth and Naomi, Boaz was very kind to her, which of course Boaz is a type of Christ. And Ruth is a type of us, or the church. And it says in Ruth 2:10, so she fell on her face, bowed down to the ground, and said to him, why have I found favor? I prefer the old King James here, grace. Why have I found grace in your eyes, that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner? Isn't that the attitude that every one of us should have toward Christ? Where we fall on our face in awe, in amazement, in wonder, that why should He even take notice of us? He didn't just take notice of us, He died for us. He went way beyond taking notice. And why would He extend grace to us? We're foreigners to God. We're strangers. We're enemies, the Bible says. He died for us when we were His enemies. And yet He still extended this kindness to us. So the three women I'm going to talk about are all women of grace, or we might say graced women. God extended His grace toward all three of them in ways that we can learn a lot about God's grace. I'm talking about the women, but I'm really talking about the grace of God that can work in every one of our lives. My mom was a graced woman. She is a graced woman. Most of you know something about her early life. Her mom died when she was 7. Her dad worked in the oil fields, was gone for long periods of time, remarried. His new wife had a son. For whatever reason, they didn't feel capable of taking care of a 7-8-year-old daughter. So she was shipped off to California to live with an aunt and uncle. And married the first man that showed her any kind of love. Her life could have, in most cases would have turned out much differently. Would have turned out to be a very sad life, but for the grace of God. The grace of God entered into her life and rescued her. And it could be said the same for my dad. You know some of his story about being a POW and thought to be dead and all of that. God's grace worked very profoundly in my mom's life. And he worked very profoundly in the lives of these three women. And from the lips, what I'd like to do, instead of just talking about them, is from their own lips, these three women said some of the deepest, most emotional, most beneficial, insightful things found in the whole Bible by the lips of anyone else. When she said to Naomi at the very beginning, when Naomi said, "Turn back," and when she said in verse 16 and 17, it's often quoted at weddings, but Ruth said, "Entreat me not to leave you or to turn back from following after you. For wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die. There will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and much more also, if anything but death parts you and me." You understand why those words are often used in wedding ceremonies. I mean, they have a lot to say about husband and wife, but they also have a lot to say. "Hello, Sarah. Come to be with her dad on Mother's Day. It's really sweet of you." But this should be said about our feeling about Christ. Wherever you go, Lord, I want to go. Wherever you lodge, I want to lodge. Wherever you die, I just want to be with you. I want to be by your side. Really expresses a sentiment. And of course, she had no clue that these words from her lips toward Naomi would be memorized, quoted, and repeated thousands, probably millions of times down through history. I mean, they're wonderful just to read, aren't they? And to think about what they mean. We often talk about Naomi saying, "I went out full and I came home empty." And I've said several times in the last few years, she was not quite as empty as she thought. Now, in her own mind, she was empty. But in Ruth's eyes, she was not empty. And it was in Naomi's emptiness that she did her greatest work with Ruth. There's something about seeing ourselves as empty that probably has a stronger effect on people than when we think we are full. They connect somehow with that emptiness. They are deeply moved by what they see in us. And our emptiness then kind of fills them up. But we never talk about Ruth's life was pretty empty at this point also, wasn't it? She had married a Jewish man who died. She was left a young widow. His brother also died. So her sister-in-law, you kind of enter into their sadness as well. Her father-in-law died, so you enter into the sadness of your mother-in-law. So those three women experienced a lot of loss and sadness in a short period of time. And then because you had married a Jewish man, probably to some degree you were an outcast among your own people. If she had stayed there, she may not have been able to find a husband among our own people because you married one of our enemy. And then we often don't think about, why did she want to go with Naomi? Other than, we talk about the spiritual influence that Naomi had on her, and she liked that and she wanted that in her life. That's a big part of it. But another part of it was Naomi was getting old. And as far as Ruth knew, Naomi didn't have anybody back in Bethlehem who would take care of her. And I think on one level, Ruth wanted to go with Naomi simply to care for her, to take care of her, as if she was her own mother. I believe that to be true. Little did she know when Naomi got back and said in verse 20 of chapter 1, "Do not call me Naomi, call me Mara," which means bitter. "For the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me." To me, that Naomi saw herself as bitter. Maybe in some ways she was acting bitter. To me, that just elevates Ruth still wanting to be with a bitter old woman to take care of. To me, it just makes it even greater. "I went out full, the Lord has brought me home again empty. Why do you call me Naomi, since the Lord has testified against me and the Almighty has afflicted me?" Little did she know, little did either one of them know, but I'm talking about from Naomi's standpoint, the last thing she could have even dreamed of at that moment was that former daughter-in-law insisting to come back with her, neither one of them knowing what their fate would be. Little did Naomi begin to even dream that Ruth coming back with her would lead to chapter 4, verse 14. "Then the women said to Naomi, 'Blessed be the Lord who has not left you this day without a close relative, and may his name be famous in Israel, and may he be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you is better to you than 7 sons has borne him.' Then Naomi took the child, laid him on her bosom, became a nurse to him." In her wildest dreams, did she ever think this former daughter-in-law would lead to such a great blessing later? She couldn't have thought it. Give God time, and He will make things right. I've seen it. I've seen it. Naomi was more like what God wanted the whole nation to be. Here was this woman in another country. Her husband and her 2 sons had died. She was bitter and empty. And yet she was a greater witness to someone of another country. That's what God wanted the whole nation to be, a witness, a light to the Gentiles. Naomi was more of that in her emptiness than the whole nation was. And God blessed her for it by the end of the story that we just read. That verse 15 of chapter 4. Who is the ultimate example of someone from that same bloodline who meets this description? hundreds and hundreds of years later. Christ came from that same bloodline. These women are saying this about Ruth's son, Obed. But it most rightly can be said about Christ. May He, Christ, be to you a restorer of life. Isn't that what He did when He saved you? And isn't that what He does all through our life as we look to Him for help? And a nourisher of your old age. I kind of bring this thought up often. I guess it's because I'm reaching the age where it becomes more important to me. But don't you hope that in your old age, Christ can be a nourisher for you? That a good part of your time is just spent in gratitude, thankfulness, praise. Thank you, Lord, for keeping me up to this point. Please stay with me until I cross the finish line. Thank you for the nourishment you give me. I tell people, ask how I'm doing. Someone said this morning, who was that? I think it was Dina said it. And all of you think it. Whoever it was said to me this morning, you're walking kind of tenderly this morning. I said, yeah, I have my dad's back and my mom's hips. And both of them are reminding me of that today. But I tell people who see that, and they kind of bring it up, ask how I'm doing. I say, well, my body is betraying me, but my mind is still halfway decent. And if I had to choose between one or the other, this is what I would choose. Because I still enjoy greatly, reading the Bible and studying, preparing sermons and lessons and videos and just thinking about the Lord and learning new things. I mean, I came back in this morning and heard what Gary said about the restoring fourfold. And I thought, I'd never heard that before, but that's great. And if I can go to a church meeting, our own church or a fellowship meeting or association or whatever it is, and leave that meeting being able to say that at least one thing I thought, boy, that was really great. I'm going to go home and study that further. Then it was not a failure for being there. It was good. Anyway, there's a lot more I could bring out from the book of Ruth. One more because it applies to Christ. 4:11. And all the people who were at the gate, the elders said, we are witnesses. The Lord make the woman who is coming to your house like Rachel and Leah, the two who built the house of Israel, and may you prosper in Ephrathah and be famous in Bethlehem. Well, who's the most famous from Bethlehem? From the same bloodline, Christ. So all the way through, it's like the ultimate example of everything they're saying is to be found in Jesus Christ. I want to talk about Hannah and some of the words from her own lips. 1 Samuel. And you should know the story. Her husband had 2 wives, and Hannah was barren, had no children. But his other wife had, it says at the end of verse 4, all her sons and daughters. Well, she had at least 2 sons and 2 daughters, but probably more. Let's say she had 6 kids, 8 kids. We don't know how many, but probably more than 4. And the reason I bring that up is we're talking about years and years of Hannah seeing the other woman give birth to children from her husband. And it's not just seeing that, knowing you wish you could be in that same place. But it says in verse 6, her rival also provoked her severely. It's like, rub it in from the other woman. And her purpose is stated to make her miserable. She had a mean spirit. She had a wickedness of taking God's blessings and turn it into a curse for her rival, it calls her. So she saw it as like competition, and she saw it as, this is just a bad scene all the way around. So in verse 7, it was year by year when she went up to the house of the Lord that she provoked her. Therefore she wept and did not eat. But we know the bitter waters, like with Naomi and with Ruth, the bitter waters were made sweet. Give God time and He will make things right. I have seen that in people's lives. Verse 10, she was in bitterness of soul and prayed to the Lord and wept in anguish. And sometimes the Lord lets us do that for years. He could have stepped in earlier. But do you think by what she had to go through, by being provoked from a rival, being in anguish, weeping, bitter, praying thousands and thousands and thousands of times. And then, of course, God let her have Samuel. And she devoted him to the Lord's service. And the Lord blessed her with, chapter 2, verse 21, 5 more children. Do you think because of what she went through, she became a better mother than she would have been? I think so. I think she was more grateful. I think she was more responsible. I think she was more loving for what she had to go through before she had the 5 other children. It made her a better mother. And Gary had the verse up here this morning when we walked in. When Samuel was born, verse 27, for this child I prayed. And we've often brought up, that wasn't a one-time prayer. That was a multitude and multitude and multitude times of prayer. Probably a number of times every day for years. Weeping and in anguish. And I think we would all agree, for this child I prayed did not stop when he was born. I think she prayed for Samuel till the day she died. Do parents ever stop praying for their children? You have to ask someone older than me. But it takes a process of time and events in much prayer, and then the blessing comes. We wish it was not so. We wish the blessing would come the first time we ask, the first time we wept, the first time we got down on our knees. But that's often not the case, usually not the case. Until the day she died, she prayed for this child. And I said that much of the sermon is about words from their own lips. Chapter 2, one of the greatest prayers ever prayed. Not just in the Bible, but ever, I think. And Hannah prayed and said, my heart rejoices in the Lord. My horn is exalted in the Lord. I smile at my enemies. That's a pretty good place to get in your life, isn't it? To be able to smile at your enemies because your heart is so full You're rejoicing so much that you don't want to be upset and mad at anything. You just want to smile at everything. Because I rejoice in your salvation. No one is holy like the Lord. There is none besides you, nor is there any rock like our God. Talk no more so very proudly. Let no arrogance come from your mouth. For the Lord is the God of knowledge. That's a great description of him, isn't it? And by him actions are weighed. The bows of the mighty men are broken. Those who stumbled are girded with strength. Those who were full have hired themselves out for bread, and the hungry have ceased to hunger. Even the barren has borne 7, and she who has many children has become feeble. Verse 5 is very interesting. She's talking about the course of life. Many things change. Those who were blessed and well off are now feeble. Those who were once not so well off are now blessed with a bunch of children. The course of life. The Lord kills and makes alive. He brings down to the grave and brings up. The Lord makes poor and makes rich. He brings low and lifts up. He raises the poor from the dust and lifts the beggar from the ash heap, to set them among princes and make them inherit the throne of glory. Now again, this is in the Old Testament. This is from a woman's lips, not a prophet or a priest or a king, but one of the most profound verses in the whole Bible about God's desire and purpose for us is to lift us up from where we are, which is we're a beggar in the ash heap. He doesn't just lift us up and leave us alone. His desire then is to take us all the way up to sit among princes. Is there a better verse that so succinctly, with so few words, describes the entire desire and purpose of God for human beings than 1 Samuel chapter 2 and verse 8? Covers the whole picture, doesn't it? And it's in the form of a prayer, but it's a prayer of praise. For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and he has set the world upon them. He will guard the feet of his saints, but the wicked shall be silent in darkness. For by strength, boy, this is one of the great truths of the Bible, by strength no man shall prevail. How do you prevail? Weeping and in anguish in prayer, like she did. The adversaries of the Lord shall be broken in pieces. From heaven he will thunder against them. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed. A wonderful prayer, a song actually from her heart, and a lot of doctrinal truth. I just want to say a few things about Abigail. Of course, we read about her in our daily Bible readings in 1 Samuel. There's only one chapter that really deals completely or mostly about her, 1 Samuel chapter 25. And I've known women like this. 1 Samuel 25 and 3. The name of the man was Nabal, and the name of his wife Abigail. She was a woman of good understanding. In other words, she had good common sense, she was wise, she had good judgment, and beautiful appearance. That's a pretty good combination, isn't it? But the man was harsh and evil in his doings. He was of the house of Caleb. She was married to a brute. And I've known women married to brutes, and it's ugly to see. Christ is not a brute to his church. Husbands are not to be brutes to their wives. That's not Bible. So she had a very difficult marriage. But she remained a pleasant, wise, beautiful woman. She could have let herself go. Why take care of myself? I'm married to a man who's a brute. Doesn't matter how I look. I don't want to keep growing and learning, and my wisdom become more as I get older because he doesn't care. He doesn't listen to me. He ignores me. It would be easy for a woman in this condition to just simply give up and let herself go. And I've known women like that. But at a time when David needed a wise counselor, it was not a prophet, it was not a priest, and it was not a king. It was a woman named Abigail. When her husband Nabal mistreated David's servants who simply wanted to shear their sheep with his servants, it was all innocent. Nabal treated them terribly, and David was determined to kill Nabal and all of his servants. He was going to commit mass murder for a slight. In other words, his reaction was an overreaction. Gary's done a good job of pointing out that David was a man of deep passions, and it sometimes got him in real trouble. And it was going to get him in deep trouble here. But Abigail stepped in, brought in him and his servant, David and his servants, a bunch of food, and talked him out of his plans. Verse 23, 1 Samuel 25. Now when Abigail saw David, she dismounted quickly from the donkey, fell on her face before David, and bowed down to the ground. She's a wise woman. Her whole demeanor was one of disarming him. So she fell at his feet and said, "Oh me, my Lord, on me let this iniquity be." A godly woman. Charge his sins against me. That's Christ-like, isn't it? Make me pay for the terrible man he is. That's hard to say, isn't it? About someone that you know is a brute, is a lug, and to say, make me pay the price for who he is. She's completely disarming David with wisdom. And please let your maidservant speak in your ears and hear the words of your maidservant. Please let not my Lord regard this scoundrel. She's pretty accurate about her own husband, Nabal. For as his name is, so is he. Nabal is his name, which means foolish. And folly is with him. But I, your maidservant, did not see the young man of my Lord whom you sent. Now therefore, my Lord, as the Lord lives, and as your soul lives, the Lord has held you back from coming to bloodshed, from avenging yourself with your own hand. Now then, let your enemies and those who seek harm for my Lord be as Nabal. And now this present which your maidservant has brought to my Lord, let it be given to the young men who follow my Lord. Please forgive the trespass of your maidservant, for the Lord will certainly make my Lord an enduring house, because my Lord fights the battles of the Lord, and evil is not found in you throughout your days. You're not an evil man, David. This is not like you. You're better than this. Yet a man has risen to pursue you and seek your life, but the life of my Lord shall be bound in the bundle of the living with the Lord your God, and the lives of your enemies he shall sling out as from the pocket of a sling. And she must have known the story about David and Goliath, huh? And it shall come to pass, when the Lord has done for my Lord, according to all the good that he has spoken concerning you, has appointed you ruler of Israel, that this will be no grief to you, nor offensive heart to my Lord, either that you have shed blood without cause, or that my Lord has avenged himself. But when the Lord has dealt well with my Lord, let the Lord take care of it. She's speaking Bible truth and principles to a man who should have known without her telling him, that he was caught up in his anger, pride. David said to Abigail in verse 32, "Blessed is the Lord God of Israel, who sent you this day to meet me." David recognized God's in this thing. God's directing this woman. And she speaks words of truth and wisdom. Verse 33, "Blessed is your advice. Blessed are you, because you have kept me this day from coming to bloodshed, from avenging myself with my own hand. For indeed, as the Lord God of Israel lives, who has kept me back from hurting you, unless you had hurried and come to meet me, surely by morning light, no males would have been left to Nabal. David received from her hand what she had brought him and said to her, "Go up in peace to your house. See, I have heeded your voice and respected your person." This is David, who had already been anointed as the next king. He was going to be her king, her ruler. But he is respecting her because of her wisdom. And of course, we know the story that God killed Nabal with a heart attack. Verse 39, when David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, "Blessed be the Lord, who has pleaded the cause of my reproach from the hand of Nabal, and has kept his servant from evil. For the Lord has returned the wickedness of Nabal on his own head." And David sent and proposed to Abigail to take her as his wife. That's back in the days where they had multiple wives. It usually didn't lead to much any good, but it was still common. And if you're looking for someone to help you go through life, Abigail's the kind of person you're looking for. She's going to help me through life when I lose my head to my emotions. And when the servants of David had come to Abigail at Carmel, they spoke to her, saying, "David sent us to you to ask you to become his wife." And she arose, bowed her face to the earth, and said, "Here is your maidservant, a servant." Look how she wants to describe herself. "I'm going to be married to the king." She didn't say that, did she? She said, "A servant to wash the feet of the servants of my Lord." You talk about a Christ-like spirit. Abigail expressed it. These were three remarkable women who did a lot of good in their lives. We are all graced people. God's grace has been poured out abundantly on every one of us. And we are to praise Him for it. We are to rejoice in it. We are to share that with other people. And if you're in need of God's grace in your life, He enters into what seems to be events that are going to cause me to be sad for the rest of my life, and somehow brings new life, new hope, new joy. That's how the grace of God works in our life. I pray that you might receive the grace of God in your heart today. We're going to have a verse of invitation song. We are graced people. We are to be thankful for it today. Let's all stand.